Hi everyone, it's Rusty here. I just want to say a big thank you to all of you who have been watching my videos here on the channel. I'm also very appreciative of all of the kind comments that all of you have made. I'm glad you found the content helpful or at least entertaining. I thought maybe today I'll do something a bit different this time and record myself as I explain my thought process so you can have this video playing in the background while you do something else. Personally, I usually listen to something while working on my model, so I figured maybe this format might suit you, as long as you can understand me, of course. And you don't have to read off a screen either. So if you've seen my other videos, then you know what I mean. Anyway, in my last video, I talked about my approach towards weathering, rather than listing out specific steps like how to do a wash or using a sponge to chip, which have already been covered extensively by other people on YouTube. I covered 3 concepts that I think is not often talked about in the Gunpla world as much. But people who are into Warhammer or military vehicles, planes, they already know them and they apply the principles to their work and they get stunning results. So I think you benefit from that as well. So check out my last video to learn more about it. For this video, we'll keep it to the usual. I don't want to discuss any specific steps. I would prefer to talk about ideas or concepts instead. And I'll use this high-grade Universal Century gem to illustrate how this particular concept can be applied. For this concept, I would say it's applicable from the moment you start your base coat all the way to the end of weathering. And before I reveal what this idea is, try to picture in your head this scenario, or maybe you've already encountered this before. So see if it's an experience that you can relate with. So say you're at your local hobby show, or maybe a local competition. You're checking out the displays, and by the way, I'm just talking about weathered builds here. I'm not talking about clean builds because I know nothing about it. I personally gravitate towards the dioramas, and maybe you see a few of them on display. Let's just say that Bandai released another RX-78 model kit that year, and you may see 2, maybe 3 of those painted by different people. They've all got their own styles, but maybe one of them stand out to you, and so your eyes are drawn to this particular one more than the others. Now at first it's hard to say why. You compare the work or the works, and maybe it's several factors. Maybe it's the colors or the weathering style. It's just a bit hard to put a finger on it, But just like how you don't have to be a good singer to tell who sings better in a talent show, you intuitively conclude that perhaps one reason for this is that just the overall finish of one model is just more visually pleasing than the other one with the same color scheme. Now, personally, for me, I like to predict who wins in a competition. So I think to myself, I like this person's work. I hope they win. And then I just wait. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you've experienced a situation similar to this. So in the scenario I described, obviously there are so many different factors at play here. Different people like different things, and I respect that. Now, all things being equal, if you're painting the same subject, the same color scheme, I think the model that would turn the most heads is usually the one that has better color harmony than the others. And that's what I wanted to discuss today. So when I first started out, I looked up this term, color harmony, online and learned about different color combinations, such as complementary, analogous, color scheme, triadic, so on and so forth. And then I just stopped there. Naturally, I wanted to apply this concept. I was very anxious. So I thought of a color scheme for my Gunpla. I explored a little bit about color theory, and I saw maybe green is complementary to red. And, I can't remember what I did in the past, but let's just say I was going for a green Zaku with a red shoulder spike. So I went out, I bought the green paint. I bought a red paint. Load up my airbrush, which is what I used in the past, and off I went. Right, Zaku's painted. It's a decent result, but when it's placed next to an intermediate or an advanced artist in, say, a competition setting, There is a stark difference. And you don't even need to be a pro to tell. So what's the deal here? I followed the guidelines on the website, right? And I read that from top to bottom. What is it that the advanced modelers know that beginners don't? And here's what I think it is. Beginners assume that color schemes are automatically harmonious. So fully saturated colors straight from the paint bottle onto your model is usually not the best idea. And again, I'm talking about weathered Gundam builds here. Maybe it works for clean builds or abstract work, logo design. If you're trying to depict giant robots fighting each other realistically, then fully saturated colors will clash because they're competing with each other. So I think we should go one step beyond color combinations and consider reducing the saturation of our paint. How do we do that? Well, let's borrow a tool that artists have been using for centuries to achieve color harmony. And this tool is called a limited palette. A limited palette simply means limiting the number of colors that you use for your entire work. The more colors you use, the more challenging it is to blend them together. My recommendation for weathered Gunpla is to avoid having more than 3 main colors for 95% of your work. The remaining 5% are usually your clear parts like visors or beam sabers, etc. But for the purposes of this video, when I say main colors, I mean the colors of the rainbow. In school, you may have learned, right? It's your red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. I don't consider white, black, brown as a main color, in case you're wondering, because I use that for every model, so it's a staple for me. Now let's look at this gym, for example. My palette only has 2 main colors in this case, and that's red and yellow. Other colors I use, white, dark brown, light brown, and that makes up about 95% of the model. I'll also use red, primarily for the base coat for the chest and feet. To darken it, I'll mix some dark brown to the red, and this will be the same dark brown as the chips or the streaks that I'll apply later on during the weathering phase. To lighten it, I'll use yellow, maybe some white, and in retrospect, I think, looking at the footage now, I probably should have used more yellow. I used too much white here, and that desaturates the red too quickly, and you lose that kind of warmth in that red. So some people may not like that. But anyway, that's a learning point for me. I'm going to push through it. Now let's look at the white section of the gym. So here I use a mixture of white and dark brown for the base coat. To lighten it, in this case I've got not much of a choice, I have to add more white. And to darken it, I use some red and brown. A tiny amount of red here will result in an overlap of colors between the red and the white armor plates. So if you notice, the colors used are always the same. The difference is just the mixture itself. The red armor parts have 80%, let's just say, red paint, and 20% of other colors. And the white armor parts have 80% white paint, again an approximate, and 20% of other paints. Could be red, brown, whatever. So I hope that makes sense. My palette for this particular project has 2 main colors, red and yellow, and that's not including the white, dark brown, and light brown. So it seems pretty simple, isn't it? Almost too obvious. So let's move on to a more complicated example with more colors. Let's say an RX 782. Right, you've got your stereotypical Gundam. It's got red, yellow, and blue parts. Okay, so for the red parts, just approach the same way, yellow to lighten, and maybe blue, and brown to darken. For the yellow parts, I'll use white to lighten, and shadow areas, I'll mix in some red and dark brown. For the blue parts, I would use yellow and white maybe to lighten for highlights, and red-brown to darken. If I use too much yellow in this case to lighten, I might actually end up with green. That's not really what I want. So sometimes I use white as well. So again, sticking to my recommendation, just 3 colors, main colors I used. I wouldn't use, say, a green, for example, to lighten my blues, or a purple to darken my red, because I don't actually have green or purple elsewhere on the model. Okay, let's try another example. Maybe, how about a green Zaku with the red shoulder spike that I mentioned earlier on. So in this case, I would grab a olive green, maybe grab yellow and white to lighten. I think red and dark brown to darken would be just fine. For the red shoulder spike, I would have yellow to lighten it, and green or dark brown for the shadows, or mixed in with the red to create a mixture for the shadows. So long story short, my limited palette consists of yellow, olive green, and red. Now, how would I change this approach if I was painting a green Zaku with a blue shoulder spike? Or maybe let's say it's a Zaku 1 because it's also green and blue. I would still stick with olive green in this case for the base color, and yellow with a bit of white to lighten the mixture. If I wanted to darken it, I'll use blue or dark brown. No red here in this case. For the blue parts, I would use green and some yellow to brighten it up, some green or dark brown to darken it. So the limited palette will consist of yellow, olive green, and blue. So what you would have noticed here is the way I mix my green changes according to what the overall color scheme is. So if that makes sense, I think we should maybe complicate things further. Yeah? Let's talk about this vignette consisting of the Zaku 1 and the gym. So now there are 2 models here. Yeah? We need the red, green, and the blue to blend together. So you know the drill now, right? Just mix all of them together. Well, let me give you a more detailed approach. So in this case, my limited palette already has yellow and red. That's because of the gym. So I only have 1 spot left for main color. And I choose blue. So that's your classic primary colors, isn't it? Red, yellow, blue. Theoretically, I should be able to mix all other colors. But compare this to my previous example. I'm just going to leave the olive green on the paint rack. Instead, I will derive my green from mixing the blue and yellow that's already on my palette, because this particular green will be different from the olive green. So this green will have shared elements of the yellow that's present on my gym, and the blue, which is present on the Zaku. So this green color would bridge the 2 models together. But wait, there's more. This green makes up only 80% of the mixture, roughly. So you mix it further with some red to desaturate it slightly, maybe some brown for the shadows. You can lighten the green by adjusting how much yellow you use. You can darken the green by adding more blue. And maybe after all of that is done, if I'm feeling adventurous, I might go to my paint rack and then I might grab the olive green. But of course, if you're a beginner, you might just want to keep it simple, start with the basic principles, and then build from there. Yeah? Leave the olive green on the paint rack for now. If you can blend 3 colors yeah, maybe you can blend 5 and you can progress and so on and so forth. Alright, I think it's pretty clear now. You know how limited palette works, but why does a limited palette help to achieve color harmony? As I mentioned earlier, that's because when you mix paint, this process desaturates your main colors slightly. And in so doing, you introduce brown and grey into the mixture. Brown and grey colors are the secret ingredient, so to speak. They enable your main color to have some sort of a common ground. So let's come back to this gym. 10 years ago, I would have looked at this gym and I would have slapped some red paint on my paintbrush, painted the red armor parts. Then clean my brush and palette, grab some white paint, paint the white armor bits, and that's it. No brown. No mixing when applying the base coat. I would have gotten a decent result, but I am fully reliant on the weathering phase to introduce brown and grey so that the red and white armor parts can blend more cohesively. In my beginner brain, the difference between a weathered build and a clean build is just the weathering phase. So, over the years, I've leaned more heavily into this style that you see now. So I had to bear in mind the idea of color harmony and saturation right from the start. I need the colors to support each other and not vie for attention. For this project, by adding other colors to the base white or red, I reduce the level of saturation, but I keep just enough contrast so we can tell at a glance which areas are red and white. Theoretically, we could go to the other end of the spectrum, desaturate everything, then we will get a grayscale. But that may be a very cohesive result, but it's not enough saturation to interest the viewer. And with all that being said and done, during the weathering phase, I'll use primarily light brown and dark brown all over the model, and that will strengthen the already present link between the different colored parts. Now finally, one last point. Someone may ask, hey look Rusty, my local hobby store has the entire range of paints. I don't like mixing paints, but I can afford to buy as many paint bottles as I want, so why not just buy the colors I need? That's a fair question. And my response to that would be, maybe that could work. Because theoretically, I see where you're coming from. Theoretically, blue and yellow makes green. So instead of doing that every time I want to paint a Zaku, I just buy a bottle of green paint, right? Save the yellow and blue paint for something else. And I personally have bottles of green, orange, purple, in addition to all the primary colors, so I don't have to keep mixing them. But it gets tricky when you're dealing with different types of green or blue or red or whatever color it is. For example, let's just say you want to paint the Goof Custom and you need to get a blue shade. You need to get a blue tint. Then you need colors for light and shadow as well for each type of blue. So that means you need 6 paint bottles. You need to go and buy 6 paint bottles. You have to choose carefully at the hobby store, and when you get home, if you realize that one of them is not an exact match, then you would still have to mix some paints and adjust the brightness or the saturation of the paint that you have. And if you don't have that much experience mixing, then you have yet to develop your instinct and you're not able to get the exact color that you want. So to answer your question, yeah, it's a yes and no. It depends. It's trial and error. But you know what? We all make mistakes. We'll fumble our way through and eventually get there. That's okay. So to summarize, here are 3 do's and don'ts for successful color combinations. Don't apply a fully saturated paint straight onto the model. Don't pick all the colors of the rainbow. You don't need anything more than 3 colors to get a good result. And finally, don't desaturate the model until visual interest is lost. Now do mix your main color with other colors or paints on the palette. Do keep within the recommendation of 3 main colors on your palette. If you already have yellow and blue on your palette, then mix your own green. That will leave one more spot open for red or something else. Do ensure that your main colors can still be detected at a glance. If you need longer than 1 second to tell you what color it is, then it's probably just too desaturated. Now, I've gone on and on about it now. I think, as you can see, color harmony isn't difficult to achieve. I just wished I had known this earlier. So I just wanted to share this with beginners out there. And if you're more experienced, I hope maybe you found it helpful as well. Or if there is something I missed, you can also comment, let me know. But let me reassure everyone by saying that I don't have a degree in fine arts, nor do I have any background in traditional canvas painting. You need practice. And after a bit of practice, it becomes intuitive. And I'd say it's improved my work. Maybe the next time you're at a hobby expo, just look past the flashy scribing and the decals. See if you can train your eye and spot how an experienced modeler would approach this concept of color harmony. Alright, I'll wrap up here. I hope you found this video helpful. My next video will be coming back to this Zaku one. I'll revisit this old work of mine. I'll show you my own mistakes and how to fix it. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.